Hey, it's Mr. Bass. I wanted to talk to you today about a little fishing trip I had just yesterday. I actually went out with my buddy, one of my fishing buddies, and we took the kayaks out and hit one of my favorite places to fish. And small little lake, large pond, probably 4 acres, something like that. Anyway, it's got a good bass population in it, and the water was warm. It was a very hot day, probably in the 90s, and we're in the middle of summer now. It's July, and the fishing can get really tough in the heat. And I thought I ought to make a video about this because I know a lot of my subscribers fish from the bank. They're pond fishermen or small lake fishermen, and a lot of times when you walk up to a body of water, especially if you're fishing from the bank, you automatically have a big obstacle, and that is moss or grass, a big barrier of vegetation right in your way. And it makes it really hard to catch fish from the bank. And that's one of the reasons I started kayak fishing, because even though I have a bass boat and I like fishing big lakes on my bass boat, I also really love fishing small water, and kayaks are perfect for that kind of stuff. It really gives you the opportunity to fish tough water, tough conditions, where you might not be able to from the bank. So in this instance, bright bluebird skies, really bright sunny day, not many clouds at all, not much cloud cover. And what do you think those bass were doing? They were looking for shade. That's just the bottom line. So when I first got out there, I thought, what am I going to do here to try to catch these fish? There's a little bit of timber, and there's actually some timber back in the shade. You've probably seen some of that on some of my previous videos. So my first thought was, I'm going to go back in the shady part of the lake first. I'm going to fish around that timber. I'm going to fish with some sort of a flipping bait. I'm going to fish with a big worm, and I'm going to see what I can pull out of there. So I went back there, did that, and it wasn't very effective. I did get a few bites on the worm, but they just weren't taking it the way I wanted them to. And the few that did really had a tough time getting them out of that brush because they just weren't biting it very well, and it was not easy to set the hook. So after I eliminated kind of the shady area of the lake, there was definitely fish there, but they were tucked up under grass. I thought, all right, I got to figure out how to fish around this grass. Now, I've done this multiple ways, and there are lots of ways that you can fish a grass edge. One of the most effective ways is to try to punch through it. Now, I was not planning on punching, but I went back to my truck to try to see what I could rig up as far as punching rig goes. I found some flipping hooks. I found some weights. I found as heavy as a 1 ounce weight, and I thought, well, 1 ounce will work. So I rigged up that 1 ounce weight, started punching, and guess what? Could not get the 1 ounce weight to penetrate through that grass. Just would not go through. And if you can't get that weight through the grass, you can forget it. You're just not going to be able to fish it. That was the heaviest weight I had, so I knew punching, my punching option was probably not going to work. Then I took out the chatterbait, ran it around the edge of there, and I think if I had stuck with that, I would have gotten some bites. But there was a lot of grass underneath there, and you know, chatterbaits work great if you can get them through the grass. In this case, it just kept getting hung up on the grass, hung up. So I decided to go with a couple of other options. And what I thought I would start with first is one of my favorite baits out there. It's a swim bait. And one of my favorite swim baits just happens to be the Gambler Big Easy. And they've got a smaller size. I like it as well, but I usually start with the Gambler Big Easy. And I really like this color, and the reason I do, it's just a great bluegill imitating bait. And that's what the forage in this pond is. It's bluegill. So I broke this out, started fishing with it. Sure enough, started catching them. And this is one of the hooks that I like to use with these swim baits. It's a screw lock swim bait. So you just take your screw lock keeper and just screw it into the nose of the bait like so. You want to make sure when you do this that you're centering it as best as you can, because obviously when you're swimming a swim bait, you want it to be straight. Now, one of the things I love about the Gambler Big Easy is it's got this nice deep hook groove in here, and it hides the hook quite well. And then all you do is just Texas rig it. You find out where it's going to go through at, and you simply push it through the bait, and you come up right in that hook keeper. And you can see, even without it being Texposed, just sitting in there, it's pretty weedless. The problem with this, skin hooking it, is I just couldn't get a lot of fish to stay on. This is a lot of plastic to get through, especially when it's skin hooked, and especially trying to fish a very specific location. So I decided, after fishing with this for, I don't know, maybe an hour, then I decided to switch it up a little bit. So this is what I went to next. So next I went to this swim bait, and this is Storm makes this, and they call it something like the GT 360 swim bait, and it has an exposed hook, and that's why I decided to start throwing this. Even though I was around the grass and timber and stuff, I decided I'm going to throw an exposed hook, and if I'm going to throw an exposed hook, I may as well throw one that's really beefy, as in gives me a lot of gap here, and is really going to increase my chances to hook up fish better. And it absolutely worked, and I got a lot of bites from this. In fact, I started getting so many bites that I didn't have to try any other technique. I just stuck with this. I'm going to show you a few video clips here. If the fish are tucked under the grass, you've got to get under the grass, or you've got to get as close to the edge of that grass as you absolutely can. If your lure is not right up against that grass edge, you're not going to get bit. It's just not going to happen. So in order to maximize your bite, you've got to parallel that grass. You've got to find a way, and this is true even if you're standing on the bank, you need to get to a corner of the pond so that you can line up with the grass line and throw your lure perfectly parallel to the edge of that grass, and fish it right along the edge of the grass, and just do that over and over and over. So these fish are tucked under here, under the edge of this grass line all the way around, and these swim baits have been working excellent if you can hug the edge and get as close to the edge as possible and drop down. So like where this thing sticks out actually helps. If you drop on the edge here and on the edge on the other side, it increases your odds of catching one. I just caught one right here. I'm going to try it again, but you got to be just as close to the edge as you can get, and even a foot away like that's usually too far. If you do it perpendicular and just throw it straight out in the middle of the lake and then reel up to the grass edge, you're almost going to catch nothing. I promise you. It's just not going to be very effective. Now, if you have no other choice than to do that, then what I would suggest is don't use a swim bait. You could use a swim bait, and the way I would use it is try to pitch it right to the edge and just let it flutter straight down, and you might get a bite that way. But you're going to be pretty disappointed. What I would do is I would take a worm like these ribbon tail worms from Berkeley and just pitch them to the edge of the grass and let them go to the bottom, or any kind of another worm like a cut tail worm, ultra vibe speed worm. You could rig a weightless wacky worm and let it flutter down on the edge. You could throw a Ned rig down there. Here's a big problem with throwing over that grass edge and trying to drop the grass edge. When you get a bite, it's going to be very hard to get that fish up and over the grass. You're not going to get it through the grass. you're gonna have to get it up and over the grass, and it's gonna create havoc for you. So by far the absolute best option, no matter what bait you choose, is parallel the edge of that grass as much as you absolutely can. All right, so here's a couple of shots of me doing that. Take a look. There's another one. That's another one. That's another one. How about that? Another one right on the grass edge. They're along the grass edge, but it's really hard to get your lure through. Chunky bass. Right in the grass. Right in the grass. I mean, kind of the first thing to keep in mind is you got to ask yourself, where are they at? You got to find them. And with this heat, that's what they're doing. It's cooler under that grass. They got food under the grass. A lot of times there's all kinds of crustaceans and bait fish and frogs. As you can see, that works. Paralleling that grass edge really did work. And I caught just about 20 bass yesterday when the fishing was really tough. And if I'd not been using that kind of a technique and fishing that way, I doubt I would have caught many fish at all. And it's really just that important. First, try to figure out what the fish are doing. Where are they located and what are they doing? In this case, they're trying to get in the shade. They're getting under that grass. All right. Second, how do I get my lure under that grass? And then third, just fish it that way. Don't try anything else. Don't try to get any more creative or magical than that. Just try to get that bait under the grass. If you do, you'll have a good day of fishing. I hope this was helpful and informative. If you've got questions about this, I'd love to see those questions in the comments. Also, if you've got better ideas than me, fantastic. Put them in the comments too. Let's share our ideas here. Maybe we can help some guys learn to catch more fish. Thanks so much for watching the channel. Thanks for supporting the Mr. Bass community. Greatly appreciated. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Share the videos would be greatly appreciated. Until next time, this is Mr. Bass. Happy fishing in the grass.